They sold her for a horse, 19 years old, standing in the dust while her own blood bargained her away like livestock. But the man who bought her, the silent farmer with grief carved into his face, he didn't chain her. He didn't break her. He gave her something she'd never known, a choice. This is the story of Iris Vale, traded like property but treated like gold. Stay until the end and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The sun was dying over Red Hollow, bleeding orange and crimson across a sky that promised nothing but more emptiness, more cruelty, more of the same suffocating existence Iris Vale had endured for 19 years. The kind of sunset that poets might call beautiful, but Iris had learned long ago that beauty was a luxury for people who weren't drowning. She stood in the yard outside her uncle's decrepit farmhouse, her bare feet caked with dirt, her thin cotton dress doing little to protect her from the evening chill that swept down from the mountains. Her hands were clasped in front of her, fingers intertwined so tightly her knuckles had gone white, not from cold, but from the effort of holding herself together. "Stop your fidgeting, girl." Uncle Clyde's voice cut through the air like a rusted blade. He stood 10 feet away, thumbs hooked into his belt, his tobacco-stained teeth visible through his sneer. "You're making me look bad in front of our guest." Iris forced her hand still. She'd learned years ago that defiance only made things worse, that words were wasted on men like Clyde Marine. He'd taken her in when her parents died of fever, taken her in and taken everything else too. Her childhood, her dignity, any hope she'd once harbored that the world might be kind. The guest Uncle Clyde referred to stood near the fence line, one boot propped on the lowest rail, studying the horse tied there with an intensity that suggested he was seeing something Iris couldn't. Ian Thorne was his name. She'd heard it whispered in town once or twice, always followed by hushed comments about the tragedy that had hollowed him out. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with shoulders broad enough to carry burdens that would break lesser men. His hair was dark, touched with premature silver at the temples, and his face was weathered in the way of men who'd spent years squinting into sun and wind. But it was his eyes that caught her, gray as winter storms, and carrying the same turbulent sorrow. He hadn't looked at her once since arriving 30 minutes ago. "Fine animal," Clyde was saying, running his hand along the horse's flank with a familiarity that made Iris's stomach turn. Everything her uncle touched, he somehow made filthy. 4 years old, good for breeding or work. Strong legs, even temperament. You won't find better in 3 counties. Ian nodded slowly, his jaw working as if he were chewing on words he refused to spit out. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and rough, like gravel settling after a storm. "The horse is acceptable." "Acceptable?" Clyde laughed, the sound like breaking glass. "That's the best mare in Red Hollow, Thorne. Show some appreciation." "I said it's acceptable." Ian's tone didn't change, but something in his posture did, a subtle straightening, a fractional shift in weight that suggested he was done with the pleasantries. "We doing this deal or not?" Clyde's grin widened, and Iris felt her heart sink deeper into her chest. She knew what was coming, had known since this morning when her uncle had dragged her out of bed before dawn, forced her to wash in the creek, and told her to look presentable for once in your worthless life. "The deal," Clyde said, savoring each word like candy, "is this. You give me that horse, and I give you her." He jerked his thumb toward Iris without even glancing in her direction. The world seemed to stop. Not in the dramatic way of stories. There was no sudden silence, no birds freezing mid-flight. The wind kept blowing. Somewhere in the distance a dog barked. The sun continued its indifferent descent, but for Iris, everything compressed into a single moment of crystallized horror. She'd known it was coming, and still, hearing it spoken aloud felt like being gutted. Ian's eyes finally cut to her, quick and assessing, and Iris wanted to disappear. Wanted the earth to open up and swallow her whole, rather than stand there being evaluated like the horse he'd just inspected. But his gaze didn't linger on her body the way men's usually did. Didn't crawl over her like something with legs. He looked at her face, really looked, and for just a second she thought she saw something in those storm-gray eyes. Recognition, maybe, or pity. Then he looked away. "No," he said flatly. Iris's breath caught. Uncle Clyde's expression darkened. No? Her uncle stepped forward, his voice dropping to something dangerous. The hell you mean no? We had an arrangement. We discussed a trade, Ian corrected, his tone maddeningly calm. I came to look at a horse. Nobody said nothing about. He gestured vaguely toward Iris, then stopped, as if unwilling to finish the sentence. About what? A girl? Clyde's laugh was ugly now, stripped of any pretense of friendliness. Come on, Thorne. Everyone knows you've been alone on that farm since the fire. 5 years, isn't it? 5 years rattling around in that cabin like a ghost. You need help. She needs a home. I need that horse. Everybody wins. Find another buyer, Ian said. He moved to untie his own horse, a massive black gelding that had been waiting patiently nearby. Panic flared in Clyde's eyes, quickly masked by anger. You're really going to walk away? When you could have a young, healthy girl to cook and clean and... I said no. Ian's voice didn't rise, but something in it made Clyde take a step back. Whatever you're selling, Marin, I'm not buying. He swung up into his saddle with practiced ease, gathering the reins. For one wild, desperate moment, Iris almost called out to him, almost begged him to reconsider. Because whatever he was, widower, recluse, broken man, he couldn't possibly be worse than her uncle, couldn't possibly hurt her more than staying here would, but shame kept her silent. The last shreds of her pride, threadbare and tattered as they were, refused to let her beg a stranger to purchase her like livestock. Ian turned his horse toward the road. Wait! The word came out cracked and hoarse. Iris barely recognized her own voice. Both men looked at her. Uncle Clyde's face was flushed with fury and something else, fear maybe, at the prospect of his plan unraveling. Ian's expression was unreadable, but he'd stopped. Please. Iris forced the word out past the constriction in her throat. Please, don't. She swallowed hard. He's going to kill me. The silence that followed was different than before, heavier, weighted with terrible truth. Shut your mouth, Clyde hissed, starting toward her. Ian's horse shifted, suddenly positioned between them. The movement looked accidental, but Iris didn't think it was. That true? Ian asked quietly, still looking at her. He hurt you? She's a liar and a drama queen, Clyde spat. Don't listen to her. She's been nothing but trouble since... I'm asking her. Those gray eyes never left Iris's face. Girl, is it true? 1,000 responses crowded Iris's throat. Yes, every day. In ways I don't have words for. In ways that have carved out everything I used to be and left nothing but fear and survival. But what came out was simpler. Yes. Ian was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working again like he was grinding up words too bitter to swallow. Finally, he looked at Clyde. The horse for the girl. That's the deal? Triumph flashed across her uncle's face. That's the deal. And after that, you don't come looking for her. Don't show up at my property. Don't send anyone else. She's done with you. We clear? Clear as crystal, Clyde said eagerly, already moving toward the mare. She's all yours, Thorne. And good riddance. Nothing but dead weight, that one. Ian dismounted, tied his gelding back to the fence, and walked toward Iris. She tensed instinctively, but he stopped a respectful distance away. Up close, she could see the lines around his eyes, the gray threading through the dark hair at his temples, the scar that bisected his left eyebrow. He looked tired. Not sleepy tired, but soul tired, like he'd been carrying something heavy for so long he'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up straight. You got anything you need from inside, he asked. Iris shook her head. Everything she owned could fit in a flour sack, and none of it was worth going back into that house for. All right, then. Ian turned back to his horse, then paused. You know how to ride? No, sir. He nodded like he'd expected that answer. You'll ride with me then. That okay? The fact that he was asking, that he was treating her like someone whose opinion mattered, nearly broke her. Iris managed a nod. Ian mounted first, then reached down. His hand was calloused and scarred, the hand of a man who'd spent his life working. Iris took it. His grip was firm but careful as he pulled her up, settling her sideways in front of him. She'd never been this close to a man who wasn't hurting her, and her whole body was rigid with anticipation of pain that didn't come. Just hold on, he said quietly. We got a ways to go. Behind them, Uncle Clyde was already leading the mare away, not even bothering to watch them leave. Iris didn't look back, didn't let herself feel anything yet. Not relief, not fear, not the strange hollowness of being traded like property, and somehow ending up grateful for it. They rode in silence as the sun finished dying and stars began pricking through the darkening sky. The temperature dropped, and Iris started shivering. Without a word, Ian shrugged out of his worn jacket and draped it around her shoulders. It smelled like wood smoke and leather and something else, something that might have been safety, though Iris barely remembered what that felt like. The ride took maybe 40 minutes, though it felt longer. They left the main road eventually, following a narrower path that wound up into the foothills. When they finally crested a rise, Iris saw it, a cabin silhouetted against the twilight, small but solid, with lamplight glowing in one window. A barn stood nearby, and she could see fenced pastures spreading out into the darkness. Ian guided the horse to the barn first, dismounting and helping Iris down before seeing to the animal. She stood awkwardly to the side, unsure what to do with her hands, while he removed the saddle and bridle with efficient, practiced movements. A massive gray stallion nickered from one of the stalls, and Ian paused to run his hand along the horse's neck. "This is Ghost," he said, glancing at Iris. "He's friendly enough, long as you don't come up behind him sudden-like." It was such a normal thing to say, such an ordinary piece of information, that Iris almost laughed. Almost. Nothing about this was normal. She'd been sold for a horse less than an hour ago. She had no idea what this man expected from her, what he'd demand in payment for this rescue that didn't feel like rescue yet, just a different kind of trap. When Ian finished with the horses, he led her toward the cabin. The porch creaked under their weight, and he paused at the door. "It's not much," he said, and there was something almost apologetic in his tone. "But it's warm and dry. You'll have your own room." He stopped, seeming to reconsider. "There's 2 bedrooms, mine and what used to be—" Another pause. "The other room. You'll take that one. I'll get a fire going." He pushed open the door and stepped aside, letting Iris enter first. The cabin was small, just like he'd said. One main room served as kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall. A table with 2 chairs sat near the window. Everything was clean but bare, functional, not comfortable. The walls were unadorned except for a single shelf that held a few books and a small wooden box. It felt like a place where someone existed but didn't live, where the occupant was just marking time until something changed or ended. Ian moved past her to the fireplace, kneeling to build up the banked coals into proper flames. Iris stood near the door, still wrapped in his jacket, watching him work. The growing firelight painted his profile in gold and shadow, the strong line of his jaw, the bend of his neck, the concentration in his movements as he coaxed the fire to life. "Coffee?" he asked without looking at her. Yes, thank you." He stood, brushing ash from his hands. "Sit down. You look like you're about to fall over." Iris sank into one of the chairs, her legs suddenly weak now that she wasn't required to stand. She watched as Ian filled a battered pot with water from a pump at the sink, measured out coffee grounds with the same methodical care he'd shown with everything else. While the coffee heated, he opened a cabinet and pulled out bread, cheese, and what looked like dried venison. "You eaten today?" he asked. Iris couldn't remember. "I don't think so." Ian nodded and brought the food to the table, along with 2 tin plates. He cut slices of bread and cheese, arranged them with the meat, and pushed one plate toward her before settling into the other chair. They ate in silence, Ian staring into the middle distance while Iris tried not to wolf down the food, despite her stomach's protests. When had she last had a full meal? Days ago? Longer? The coffee was ready soon, and Ian poured 2 cups. The liquid was dark and bitter, but it was hot, and Iris wrapped her cold fingers around the cup gratefully. "Rules," Ian said finally, breaking the silence. Iris tensed. Here it comes, she thought. The conditions, the expectations, the price. "You work if you want to," he continued, still not quite looking at her. "There's plenty to do. Cooking, cleaning, mending, garden work when spring comes, but you don't have to. Not right away." He paused. "You got hurt. Probably need time to figure yourself out." "I can work," Iris said quickly. Too quickly. "I'm a good worker. I can—" I'm sure you can. Ian's voice was patient. But I'm saying you don't have to prove nothing. Not to me. Iris stared at him, trying to understand what kind of trick this was. Men didn't buy women because that's what he'd done, no point prettying it up, without expecting something in return. Your room is yours, Ian went on. There's a lock on the door if you want it. I won't bother you. Finally, he met her eyes, and his expression was serious. I know what this looks like. Know what you're probably thinking, but I didn't bring you here to... He stopped, jaw tightening. That's not what this is. Then what is it? The question came out sharper than Iris intended. Ian was quiet for a long moment. Honestly, I don't know. I saw you standing there looking like... He gestured vaguely, like you'd given up, and I thought about saying no and riding away, thought about it real hard. But then you said he was going to kill you, and... He exhaled roughly. I couldn't. That's all. I couldn't leave you there. So this is charity? Something defensive flared in Iris's chest. No. Ian's answer was immediate. This is... He searched for words. This is a trade. You need a place that's safer than what you had. I need... He stopped again, and when he continued, his voice was softer. I need to not live in a tomb anymore. Maybe having someone else here will help with that. Maybe it won't. But either way, you're not charity. You're not property. You're just here. Iris didn't know what to say to that. Didn't know what to do with kindness that came without visible strings. So she stayed silent, drinking her coffee, while the fire crackled and the wind picked up outside. Eventually, Ian stood. Come on, I'll show you the room. He led her through a door on the far side of the main room, down a short hallway. There were 2 doors, one closed, one open. Ian gestured to the open one. That's yours. Iris stepped inside. The room was small and plain, a narrow bed with a quilt, a chest of drawers, a single window that looked out toward the dark shapes of mountains. But it was clean, and the bed looked soft, and there was a candle on the windowsill. There's extra blankets in the chest if you get cold, Ian said from the doorway. And like I said, the door locks, from the inside. He produced a key from his pocket and held it out. Iris took it, their fingers not quite touching. The metal was warm from his body heat. Anything else you need? He asked. About 1,000 things, Iris thought. Safety, answers. Some guarantee that this wasn't just a prettier cage. But what she said was, no, this is fine. Thank you. Ian nodded. Try to get some sleep. We can figure out the rest tomorrow. He left, closing the door behind him. Iris stood frozen for a moment, listening to his footsteps retreat. Then the sound of him moving around the main room, banking the fire, washing the dishes, settling in for the night. Normal sounds, domestic sounds. Slowly she moved to the door and turned the key. The lock clicked into place with a soft snick that sounded like the loudest thing in the world. She pressed her palm against the wood, feeling how solid it was, how sturdy. A door that locked from the inside. A room that was hers. Something inside her chest cracked open, just a little. Iris turned back to the bed, pulled off Ian's jacket, and folded it carefully on the chest, then lay down fully clothed. The quilt smelled like cedar and lavender. Someone had stored it with sachets probably years ago. She pulled it up to her chin and stared at the ceiling, where shadows danced in the candlelight. She'd been sold today, traded for a horse like livestock. By all rights, she should be sobbing or screaming or breaking down completely. Instead, she felt numb, hollow. Like all the fear and pain and shame had finally filled her up so completely that there was no room left for new emotions. She was a vessel that had cracked and emptied, and now she was just waiting to see what, if anything, would pour in to replace what had leaked out. Outside, an owl called. The wind rattled the window. And somewhere in the cabin, Ian Thorne, the stranger who'd bought her freedom, or maybe just traded one prison for another, was settling into sleep. Tomorrow would bring answers, or more questions, or something worse than either. But tonight, Iris had a locked door and a warm bed. Tonight, that was enough. The days that followed fell into a pattern, though calling it routine would be too generous. Routine implied comfort, familiarity. things Iris was still too wary to accept. But there was structure, at least. She woke each morning to the sound of Ian moving around outside, already hours into his work. The first time it happened, Iris had jolted awake in panic, disoriented and terrified until she remembered where she was. By the third day, she'd learned to recognize his footsteps, the rhythm of his movements that said, "I'm here, but I'm not a threat." He never knocked on her door, never tried the handle. Each morning, she'd emerge to find coffee already made, bread on the table, and the cabin empty. A note the first day, "Help yourself to whatever you need," and then nothing, just the evidence of his presence and consideration. Iris started tentatively. She washed the dishes, swept the floor, small things that needed doing, and gave her hands something to occupy them. Ian never commented, never thanked her or criticized, just accepted the changes the way he seemed to accept everything, with quiet stoicism. On the fourth day, she ventured outside. The farm was bigger than she'd realized in the dark. The barn housed 4 horses, Ghost, the stallion, 2 mares, and a young gelding that whinnied when she approached. There was a chicken coop, currently empty but still sound. Fenced pastures stretched toward the tree line, and beyond that she could see the dark line of forest climbing into the mountains. Ian was in the far pasture, mending a section of fence. He glanced up when she emerged, gave a small nod, then returned to his work. No questions about why she'd come out. No demands that she help or stay inside. Just acknowledgement and then space. Iris walked to the edge of the porch and sat down, tucking her skirt around her legs. The sun was warm despite the autumn chill, and the air smelled clean, like pine and earth and growing things. No stink of liquor and unwashed bodies, no undertone of threat. She watched Ian work. His movements were efficient, practiced. This was a man who'd spent years doing everything himself, who'd learned to be self-sufficient out of necessity rather than choice. When he finished the fence, he moved to the barn, and Iris saw him lead Ghost out for what looked like exercise or training. The stallion was magnificent, tall and powerful, with a coat like smoke and eyes that held fierce intelligence. Ian worked him in a wide circle, speaking too quietly for Iris to hear the words, but communicating something through posture and patience. The horse responded, moving through what looked like complex maneuvers with remarkable grace. "He's beautiful." The words were out before Iris realized she'd spoken aloud. Ian paused, looking over at her with surprise, as if he'd forgotten she was there. "Yeah," he agreed. "He knows it too, proud as the devil." It was the most casual thing he'd said to her since that first night. Something about it made Iris brave. "Where'd you get him?" she asked. Ian ran a hand along Ghost's neck. "Bought him as a colt 7 years back. He stopped, and Iris saw his jaw tighten. "My wife wanted to breed horses, build it into something real. So I bought the best stock I could find." He was quiet for a moment. "Never got around to the breeding part." The mention of his wife hung in the air like smoke. Iris wanted to ask, wanted to understand what had happened, why this man lived alone in grief, but she swallowed the questions. She had no right to his story when she'd barely shared her own. Instead, she said, "Can I help?" Ian looked at her, really looked like he was measuring something. "You know anything about horses?" "No." Iris stood, brushing off her skirt. "But I can learn." Something flickered in his expression, not quite a smile, but close. "All right then. Come here." He spent the next hour teaching her basic things. How to approach a horse without spooking it. Where to stand. How to read their body language. The way to offer treats. Apple slices from the cold cellar. Flat-palmed so fingers didn't get mistaken for food. Ghost tolerated her with patient condescension, while the younger gelding, a bay Ian called Copper, seemed delighted by the attention. "He's just a baby still," Ian explained, watching Copper nuzzle Iris's shoulder. 3 years old. Still thinks everything is a game." Iris found herself smiling, actually smiling, as the horse lipped at her hair. "He's sweet." "He's a nuisance," Ian said, but there was affection in his voice. "But yeah, sweet too." They worked together companionably until early afternoon when Ian declared it time for a break. Back in the cabin, Iris made more coffee while Ian washed up at the pump. They ate cold leftover venison and bread, sitting at the table that was beginning to feel less like a barrier and more like a shared space. "Tomorrow I'm riding into town," Ian said abruptly. "Need supplies. You can come if you want, or stay here. Your choice." Iris hesitated. The thought of town, of people staring, whispering, knowing she'd been bought, made her stomach clench. But staying alone felt worse somehow, like admitting she was still scared. "I'll come," she heard herself say. Ian nodded. "We'll leave after dawn. It's a couple hours' ride." That night, Iris lay in her bed, because it was hers now, she was starting to accept that, and realized she hadn't thought about Uncle Clyde once all day, hadn't braced herself for violence, hadn't measured every movement for potential threat. One day of peace. It didn't erase 19 years of pain, but it was something. Town was a revelation and a nightmare. Red Hollow was small. Just a main street lined with worn buildings, a general store, a blacksmith, a church, and a saloon that looked like it had seen better decades. The place had the tired air of somewhere that had once had dreams but settled for survival. People stared when Ian and Iris rode in, both mounted on ghosts since Iris still couldn't ride well enough for her own horse. The stares weren't subtle. Eyes followed them from doorways and windows, conversations paused, then resumed in furious whispers. Iris felt each look like a physical touch and had to fight not to curl into herself. "Ignore them," Ian said quietly as he dismounted and helped her down. Small towns got nothing better to do than gossip, but even he looked uncomfortable with the attention as they walked to the general store. The bell above the door chimed their entrance, and the woman behind the counter looked up with a smile that froze when she saw them. "Ian," she said slowly, "didn't expect to see you." "Mrs. Garrett," Ian nodded politely, "need to stock up on some things." The woman's eyes cut to Iris, measuring her from head to toe with the kind of assessment that made Iris want to disappear. "I heard you'd taken in one of the Marin girls. Didn't believe it." "This is Iris," Ian said flatly, offering no other explanation. "Mm-hmm." Mrs. Garrett's expression said she was already composing the story she'd tell everyone who came in after them. "Well, what can I get you?" Ian rattled off a list. Flour, sugar, coffee, salt, dried goods. Mrs. Garrett gathered items with efficient movements, all while sneaking glances at Iris like she was something curious and slightly dangerous. "You settling in all right, dear?" she asked with false sweetness. Before Iris could answer, Ian cut in. "She's fine." "This everything?" He gestured to the goods on the counter. "That's 50 cents. Ian paid without comment, gathered the supplies, and was heading for the door when it opened and another woman entered. This one was different, older, maybe 60, with gray hair pulled back in a neat bun and eyes that were sharp but not unkind. She wore practical clothing and carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd earned respect rather than demanded it. "Ian Thorne," she said warmly. "About time you showed your face." "Miss Doone." Ian's posture relaxed fractionally. "Good to see you." "Is it? You only come to town when you're desperate." Her gaze shifted to Iris, and unlike Mrs. Garrett's assessment, this felt more like genuine interest. "And you must be Iris. I'm Mara Doone. I deliver babies, set bones, and generally keep folks around here from dying of their own stupidity." The healer. Iris had heard of her. Everyone in Red Hollow knew Mara Doone. "Nice to meet you," Iris managed. "Walk with me," Mara said, already moving toward the door. It wasn't really a request. Iris glanced at Ian, who shrugged slightly. "I'll load the supplies. Meet you out front." So Iris followed Mara into the street, feeling exposed under the continued stares of townspeople. "Don't mind them," Mara said cheerfully, hooking her arm through Iris's like they were old friends. "Half these people couldn't find excitement if it bit them, so they manufacture drama wherever they can. You living with Aeon has given them enough gossip for 6 months." "I'm not," Iris started, then stopped, unsure how to explain. "Not his lover?" Mara supplied bluntly. "I figured. That boy hasn't looked at a woman that way since Sarah died. You're safe with him, if that's what you're worried about." The directness was startling. "I didn't—" "Oh, honey," Mara squeezed her arm gently. I was there when your uncle tried to marry you off to that rancher from Cooper's Bend. Watched him parade you around like livestock. Heard the stories about how he treated you. Her voice softened. I'm glad you got out, however it happened. Iris felt tears prick her eyes and blinked them back fiercely. She would not cry in the middle of town. Listen to me, Mara continued, steering them toward a quieter side street. I don't know what arrangement you and Ian have, and it's none of my business. But I want you to know something. She stopped, turning to face Iris directly. You're not a debt, child. You're not property. You're not charity. You're a beginning, a chance at something better. Don't let anyone, not the gossips, not your past, not even your own guilt, take that from you. I don't know how to be anything else, Iris whispered. Then you learn. Mara's smile was fierce and warm. One day at a time. And if you ever need help, if things go bad, or you need to talk, or you just want some goddamn company that isn't a grieving man and his horses, you come find me. My house is the blue one on Maple Street. Doors always open. Iris nodded, not trusting her voice. Good girl. Mara patted her arm. Now, let's get you back before Ian thinks I've kidnapped you. That man worries more than he lets on. They returned to find Ian waiting with Ghost, supplies already loaded. He looked between them with mild suspicion. What'd she tell you, Chem? He asked Iris. That you worry too much, Iris said before she could think better of it. Mara laughed, bright and genuine. Smart girl. You keep her, Ian. She's good for you. She swept off before either of them could respond, leaving Iris and Ian standing awkwardly in the street. She's not wrong, Ian said finally. I do worry. He offered his hand to help Iris mount. Ready to go home? Home. The word hit Iris strange, too big, too hopeful, but she took his hand and let him pull her up onto Ghost's broad back. Yeah, she said quietly. Let's go home. The ride back was quiet, but it was the comfortable kind of silence that had started to develop between them. Iris leaned against Ian's chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing, the warmth of him against the autumn chill. She thought about Mara's words. You're a beginning. Maybe that was true. Maybe she could be more than the sum of her scars. Maybe this strange, unexpected refuge could become something real. Behind them, Red Hollow faded into the distance, all its whispers and stares left behind. Ahead, the mountains rose dark and solid against the sky, and somewhere up there, nestled in the foothills, was a small cabin with a locked door and a warm fire. Not a prison, not anymore. A home. They rode toward it together, two broken people learning how to be whole. The weeks that followed their trip to town settled into something Iris had never experienced before, a rhythm that felt almost like peace. She woke each morning to sunlight filtering through her window, dressed in clothes that Ian had quietly left folded outside her door, simple things, practical dresses and dark cotton that fit well enough, and emerged to find the cabin already warm, coffee already brewing. Some mornings she found him at the table, reading one of his few books with that intense focus he brought to everything. Other mornings he was already outside, and she had the space to herself. Time to breathe, to think, to remember what it felt like to exist without fear crawling up her spine. She started cooking, real cooking, not the hurried, joyless meals she'd thrown together under her uncle's roof while he shouted criticisms. Here, she could take her time. Could experiment with the limited supplies in Ian's pantry and the vegetables still clinging to life in the garden behind the cabin. She made stews that simmered for hours, bread that filled the cabin with yeast and warmth, apple pies from the gnarled tree near the barn that Ian said hadn't been tended in years. He never asked her to cook, never demanded or expected, but she saw the way his eyes softened when he came in from the cold to find supper waiting, the way he ate slowly like he was savoring not just the food, but the fact of it, the presence of another person, the small domestic miracle of not being alone. This is good, he said one evening, his fork pausing over venison stew. Really good. Iris felt warmth bloom in her chest, unfamiliar and precious. Thank you. No. Ian looked at her directly, something he still didn't do often. Thank you. I've been eating like a bachelor for 5 years. This is... He gestured vaguely at the table, the food, the lamplight. This is more than I knew I needed. They were finding their way towards something, Iris realized. Not friendship exactly, not yet, but partnership maybe. Two people learning to occupy the same space without causing each other pain. The horses helped. Iris spent hours with them now, under Ian's patient instruction. She learned how to curry their coats, how to clean hooves, how to measure grain and read the subtle signals that meant content or discomfort. Copper, the young gelding, became her particular favorite. He was goofy and affectionate in a way that made her laugh, something she'd almost forgotten how to do. "You're good with him," Ian observed one afternoon, watching Iris brush tangles from Copper's mane while the horse dozed contentedly. "Got gentle hands." "He makes it easy," Iris said. "He's not complicated." "No." Ian leaned against the stall door, arms crossed. "Horses are honest. They don't pretend. You're kind to them, they're kind back. You hurt them, they remember. Wish people were that straightforward." There was something in his voice, not quite bitterness, but close. Iris glanced at him, saw the way his gaze had gone distant, fixed on something only he could see. "Your wife," she said quietly. "Sarah. She liked horses?" Ian was silent so long Iris thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "Yeah. She loved them, said they were the only creatures in the world with sense enough not to lie." He paused. "She grew up on a ranch in Montana, could ride before she could walk, or so she claimed. When we married, she made me promise we'd build something together. A real horse farm, breeding stock, training them proper." His jaw worked. "We had 5 years. Got the land, built the barn, bought Ghost and the mares, then—" He stopped. The silence stretched thin and fragile. "The fire," Iris supplied softly. She'd heard whispers in town, fragments of tragedy. "The fire." Ian's voice was flat now, stripped of emotion in that way that meant there was too much feeling to let any of it out. "Started in the cabin, middle of the night. Lamp fell, or maybe the stove, I still don't know. I woke up to smoke and Sarah screaming. Got her out first, then went back for—" He stopped again, and this time Iris saw his hands tighten into fists. "Our son, Elijah. He was 3. By the time I found him, the smoke was too thick. I got him outside, but—" His voice cracked. "He didn't wake up. Smoke took him." Iris felt her throat close. "I'm so sorry." "Sarah died 2 days later, burns and smoke damage. They tried, but—" Ian exhaled roughly. "She kept asking for Elijah. Didn't have the heart to tell her he was already gone. So I lied and said he was fine, he was safe, she'd see him soon." He looked at Iris then, and his eyes were terrible. Last words she heard were lies. "They were mercy," Iris said firmly. "That's not the same as lies." Ian shook his head. "Doesn't matter now. They're both gone. And I'm still here in this place we were supposed to build together, pretending I know what I'm doing." He pushed off from the stall door. "Sorry, didn't mean to dump all that on you. No, Iris stepped forward without thinking. "I asked, and I'm glad you told me." He looked at her, something shifting in his expression. "Yeah? Yeah." Iris took a breath. "You've been patient with me. Let me be broken without asking me to explain. Least I can do is listen when you need to talk." "I don't need—" Ian started, then stopped. "That's not true. Maybe I do need. I've just forgotten how." They stood there in the quiet barn, hay dust floating in shafts of autumn light, 2 people carrying grief too heavy for one person alone. Then Copper nickered impatiently, breaking the moment, and Ian huffed something that might have been a laugh. "Come on," he said. "Let's finish up here. Getting cold." But something had shifted between them. Some wall had developed a crack, and through it, Iris could see the shape of the man Ian had been before tragedy carved him hollow. Could imagine what it might be like if they both healed enough to be whole. The thought terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. That night, Iris hummed while she cooked. She didn't realize she was doing it until she caught Ian watching her from across the room, his expression unreadable. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "Nothing." But his mouth quirked slightly. It's nice. The humming. Sarah used to do that. Drove me crazy at first, but then—" He shrugged. House was too quiet after. Iris started to apologize, but Ian held up a hand. Don't stop, please. It's good to have sound in here again. Life. So Iris kept humming, and if her voice wavered a little, neither of them mentioned it. Winter was coming. Iris could feel it in the morning frost that silvered the grass, in the way the wind bit sharper each day, in how the horses grew thicker coats, and the chickens Ian had bought in town huddled together for warmth. They worked together to prepare, stacking firewood, checking the barn for drafts, laying in supplies for the months when snow would make the trip to town impossible. One afternoon, while organizing the small root cellar, Iris found it, a wooden toy horse, barely bigger than her palm, charred black on one side. She lifted it carefully, her heart clenching as she understood what it was. That was Elijah's. Ian's voice came from behind her, quiet. Only thing I could save from his room. Iris turned, the toy cradled in her hands. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. It's all right. Ian descended the cellar steps slowly. I kept meaning to put it somewhere proper, just never could figure out where. He took the toy from her, his thumb rubbing over the scorched wood. Sarah's father made it when Eli was born. Hand-carved it from cedar. His voice was thick. He loved this thing. Took it everywhere. Used to make it gallop across the table during supper, and Sarah would pretend to scold him, but she was always smiling. He sounds like he was wonderful, Iris said softly. He was. Ian's eyes were bright with unshed tears. He was everything, and I couldn't... His voice broke. I couldn't save him. Without thinking, Iris reached out and took his hand, the one not holding the toy. Ian flinched, then stilled, looking down at their joined hands like he'd forgotten what human touch felt like. It wasn't your fault, Iris said firmly. You tried. You went back. That's everything. It wasn't enough. It was all you could do. Iris squeezed his hand, and Sarah knew that. I never met her, but I know she knew that. A mother, a wife who loved you, she wouldn't blame you. Maybe, Ian's voice was raw, but I blame me. They stood there in the dim cellar, surrounded by jars of preserves and hanging onions, holding on to each other like drowning people who'd found driftwood. Eventually, Ian pulled his hand away gently, wiping his eyes. Thank you, he said gruffly. Thank you. Any time, Iris told him, and meant it. That night she lay awake in her room, thinking about grief and how it carved spaces in people that never quite filled in again. She thought about Ian carrying his loss alone for 5 years, rattling around this cabin like a ghost haunting his own life. Thought about how she'd been so focused on her own pain that she hadn't considered his, hadn't understood that buying her hadn't been charity or transaction, but maybe, possibly, a desperate man's attempt to push back against the emptiness. Maybe they were saving each other. The thought was strange and fragile, but it settled in her chest and stayed there. The first snow came 2 weeks later, soft and sudden. Iris woke to find this world transformed, white silence stretching as far as she could see, the cabin wrapped in winter's careful hush. She stood at her window, breath fogging the glass, and felt something unnamed twist in her chest. She'd seen snow before, of course, but she'd never been somewhere safe enough to just watch it fall without worrying about whether there'd be enough firewood, enough food, whether the cold would be the thing that finally ended her uncle's thin patience. Here, she could just watch, could appreciate the beauty without the fear. Pretty, isn't it? Iris turned to find Ian in her doorway, not inside, never inside, but standing respectfully in the hall with 2 cups of coffee. She'd left her door open when she'd gotten up, and apparently he'd taken that as invitation enough to approach. It's beautiful, she agreed, taking the offered cup. Thank you. We should check the barn, Ian said. Make sure everyone stayed warm. They bundled into coats and boots, then stepped out into the pristine morning. The snow came up to Iris's ankles, and the cold bit through her stockings, but she found herself laughing, actually laughing, at the sheer novelty of it. Clean snow, safe cold, winter that meant cozy evenings by the fire instead of huddling for warmth while her uncle drank himself mean. Ian glanced at her, and something in his face softened. You look different when you smile. Iris felt her cheeks heat. Different how? Younger. Lighter. He pushed open the barn door. Like maybe you remember what it's like to be happy. I'm learning, Iris said quietly. The horses were fine, warm and content in their stalls. Ghost huffed at them imperiously, offended by the snow on their coats, while Copper immediately tried to eat Eon's hat. They worked together in comfortable silence, feeding and watering, checking hooves and blankets. I've been thinking, Ian said as they finished up, about getting more chickens in spring, maybe some goats. If we're going to make this place work as a real farm, we need to diversify. We? Iris repeated, her heart skipping. Ian paused, seeming to realize what he'd said. I mean, if you're staying, you don't have to. You're free to leave any time. But if you wanted to stay, he cleared his throat. I could use the help. And the company. I want to stay, Iris said before she could second-guess herself. If that's all right? Relief flashed across Ian's face, quickly masked. Yeah, that's good. They walked back to the cabin through the falling snow, and Iris felt something settle inside her. A decision made. A future. Tentative and uncertain, but real. That evening, Mara Dune appeared at their door like a vision from a winter story, wrapped in fur and wool and carrying a basket that smelled like heaven. Before you ask, she announced, stomping snow from her boots, I came to check on you both and bring supplies. And no, the snow isn't too deep for me to manage. I've been delivering babies in worse weather than this for 40 years. Ian stepped aside, trying to hide his amusement. Come in, Miss Dune. Coffee? Please? And some of whatever you're cooking, Iris, because it smells divine. They settled around the table and Mara unpacked her basket. Bread, butter, honey, dried herbs, and a bottle of amber liquid that Ian eyed with suspicion. Medicinal, Mara said firmly. For the cold. It's whiskey, Ian observed. Medicinal whiskey. Mara grinned. Now pour me some of that coffee and tell me how you two are managing out here. What followed was the most normal evening Iris had experienced in longer than she could remember. Mara was warm and funny and relentlessly nosy in the way of people who cared too much not to pry. She asked about the horses and the farm, praised Iris's cooking until Iris blushed, and shared town gossip that made even Ian crack reluctant smiles. Mrs. Garrett is still talking about you two, Mara said, accepting a second helping of stew. Has half the town convinced you're living in sin? The other half thinks Ian's lost his mind. What do you think? Iris asked quietly. Mara looked between them, her sharp eyes assessing. I think two lonely people found each other at the right time. What you make of that is your business, not mine or anyone else's. She paused. But I'm glad you're here, Iris. Ian needs someone to remind him he's still alive. And you, well, you needed somewhere to remember you're worth more than how you were treated. The words hit Iris hard, and she felt tears prick her eyes. Ian, seeming to sense her distress, changed the subject. How are things in town? He asked. Anyone need help before the pass closes? Mara launched into stories of Red Hollow's various disasters and dramas, and the moment passed. But later, after she'd left and they were cleaning up, Ian said quietly, She's right, you know. About what? You being worth more. He set down the dish he was drying. Whatever your uncle told you, whatever he made you believe, it was lies. All of it. Iris stared at the soapy water, unable to look at him. How do you know? Because I see you. Ian's voice was low but firm. See how hard you work, how gentle you are with the animals, how you hum when you think no one's listening. See you trying to heal yourself while carrying all that weight. That's not worthless. That's... He paused. That's brave. I don't feel brave, Iris whispered. Brave people never do. Ian picked up another dish. They just keep going anyway. That night, Iris dreamed of snow and horses and a small cabin filled with lamplight and laughter. Dreamed of a future where the past didn't chase her, where peace was possible. When she woke, the dream lingered, soft and sweet as hope. The winter deepened. Days grew shorter, nights longer and colder. They settled into the kind of domesticity that Iris had only read about in books. Mornings spent tending animals, Afternoons working on small projects around the farm, evenings by the fire with coffee and conversation. Ian taught her to play chess with a set he'd carved himself, and she was terrible at it but loved the excuse to sit across from him and watch his face relax into concentration. She taught him songs her mother used to sing before the fever took her, and he listened with the kind of attention that made her feel like the words mattered. "Sing that one again," he said one evening after she'd finished a ballad about a sailor's lost love. The one about coming home. So Iris sang it again, and Ian closed his eyes, and in the firelight he looked almost at peace, almost whole. "Sarah sang too," he said when she finished. "Different songs, but she had a voice like yours, sweet." He opened his eyes. "I'd forgotten what that was like, having music in the house." "I can stop if it's too hard," Iris offered. "No." Ian's answer was immediate. "Don't stop. I'm glad to remember. The good parts, not just the loss." They were healing, Iris realized, both of them. Slowly, carefully, like bones knitting back together after being broken. It wouldn't be fast, and the scars would always show, but they were healing. Then, on a gray afternoon when the wind howled and snow piled high against the cabin walls, everything changed. Iris was in the barn, checking on the horses, when Copper suddenly shied, eyes rolling white. Ghost snorted and stamped, and the mares pressed against the back of their stalls. Animal fear, the kind that meant predator or danger. Iris's heart kicked into overdrive. "Ian!" she called, backing toward the door. He was there in seconds, rifle in hand. "What is it?" "The horses. Something spooked them." Ian moved past her, scanning the barn with trained alertness. Then his whole body went rigid. "Get inside. Now." "What? Inside?" His voice cracked like a whip. "Lock the door. Don't come out until I say." Iris ran. Behind her, she heard Ian's voice, low and deadly. "I thought I told you to stay away from my property." Uncle Clyde. Ice flooded Iris's veins. She burst into the cabin and slammed the door, throwing the bolt with shaking hands. Through the window, she could see two figures near the barn, Ian and her uncle, facing each other in the snow. No. God, no. Not now. Not when she was finally safe. She couldn't hear what they were saying, but she saw Clyde gesturing angrily, saw Ian shake his head, saw her uncle step forward, and Ian raise the rifle. Not pointing it, not yet, but the threat clear. Iris pressed against the door, trembling. She should stay inside, like Ian said. Should trust him to handle this. But fear crawled up her throat, fear that her uncle would hurt him, that she'd lose this fragile safe haven, that she'd be dragged back to hell. The confrontation stretched minutes that felt like hours. Then Clyde turned and stalked away, disappearing into the trees. Ian stood there a long moment, rifle lowered but still alert, before finally heading back to the cabin. Iris threw open the door. "What did he want?" "You." Ian's face was granite. "Said the trade was temporary, said he's changed his mind and wants you back." He paused. "Told him to go to hell." "He'll come back," Iris said, and hated how her voice shook. "He always comes back. He doesn't let go of things." "Let him come." Ian set the rifle by the door. "He sets foot on this property again. I'll do more than threaten." "He had friends with him. I saw them in the trees." Ian's jaw tightened. "How many?" "2, I think." "All right." He was already moving, checking the cabin's windows, the locks. "We prepare. Extra ammunition, watch in shifts if we need to. But Iris?" He caught her shoulders gently. "Look at me. He's not taking you. I don't care what he thinks he's owed. You're not going back there." "Why?" The question burst out of her. "Why do you care? You barely know me. I was just a transaction." "No." Ian's grip tightened slightly. "You were never just a transaction. You were..." He struggled for words. "You were someone who needed help, and now you're..." He stopped, something vulnerable crossing his face. "Now you're someone I can't imagine not being here, all right? So we protect this. We protect you. Whatever it takes." Iris stared at him, at this broken, grieving man who'd somehow decided she was worth defending, who'd given her safety and space, and the first real kindness she'd known in years, who looked at her now like she mattered. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." They spent the rest of the day preparing. Ayan showed Iris how to load and fire the rifle, though she prayed she'd never need to use it. They checked supplies, made sure they could barricade if necessary. When night fell, they sat by the fire, both too keyed up to sleep. "Tell me something," Ayan said suddenly. "Something about before your uncle." Iris hesitated, then said, "My mother used to braid flowers into my hair in summer. We had a garden, nothing fancy, just wildflowers and herbs. She said beauty mattered even when everything else was hard." Her throat tightened. "She died when I was 12. My father followed 6 months later. That's when Uncle Clyde took me in." "And he hurt you?" It wasn't a question. "Every day." The words came easier now. Never in ways that showed much. Bruises where clothes covered them. Words that cut deeper than any hand. He said I was a burden, said I should be grateful he didn't just leave me to starve. After a while, I believed him. "He's a liar and a coward," Ian said flatly. "And if he comes back, I'll make sure he knows what happens to men who hurt children." The fierce protectiveness in his voice made Iris's chest ache. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything. For buying me, even though you didn't want to. For being kind. For making me feel human again." Ian looked at her across the firelight. "Best bargain I ever made," he said quietly. "That horse was good, but having you here..." He shook his head. "You brought this place back to life. Brought me back to life. So thank you too." They sat in silence after that, comfortable and warm, while outside the wind howled and snow fell, and somewhere in the darkness, danger waited. But inside the cabin, two broken people held on to the fragile beginning of something worth protecting. Morning would bring whatever came next. Tonight, they had each other and locked doors and the fierce determination to survive. It would have to be enough. Dawn came cold and gray, the kind of winter morning that felt more like twilight than sunrise. Iris had barely slept, spending most of the night listening to every creak of the cabin, every gust of wind, imagining her uncle's return with each sound. When she finally emerged from her room, she found Ayan already awake, sitting at the table with his rifle across his lap and dark circles under his eyes that said he hadn't slept at all. "Coffee's ready," he said without looking up from the window he'd been watching. Nothing moved out there all night. Maybe he gave up. He won't give up. Iris poured herself a cup with hands that weren't quite steady. He never does. When he wants something, She stopped, swallowing hard. He doesn't stop until he gets it or until something makes him stop. Ian finally looked at her, and his expression was grim. Then will be the thing that makes him stop. They went through the morning routine with tension humming beneath every movement. Feeding the horses, checking the perimeter, bringing in more firewood, everything normal on the surface while they both listened for sounds that didn't belong, watched for movement in the trees. The snow had stopped during the night, leaving the world crystalline and too quiet, the kind of silence that felt like held breath. It was mid-morning when Mara arrived again, her horse picking carefully through the drifts. Ian was outside immediately, rifle ready, relaxing only slightly when he recognized her. "Easy, boy," Mara called. "It's just me coming to check on my favorite hermit and his..." She paused, seeming to search for the right word. "His friend." "You shouldn't be out here," Ian said, but he helped her down from the saddle. "It's not safe." "That's exactly why I'm here." Mara's face was serious as she followed them inside, stamping snow from her boots. "Word got to town last night. Clyde Marin's been drinking at the saloon, talking loud about taking back what's his. Says he's got hired men coming, says he's going to teach you a lesson about interfering in family business." Iris felt ice slide down her spine. "How many men?" "3, maybe 4. Drifters mostly, the kind who'll do anything for whiskey and a few coins." Mara gripped Iris's shoulders. "You can't stay here, child. Neither of you. Come to town with me. Stay at my place until this blows over." "No?" Ian's voice was flat. "I'm not running from trash like Clyde Marin. This is my land, my home. He wants to come here, let him, but he's not taking her." "Ian, be reasonable. I am being reasonable." He moved to the window, scanning the tree line. "Out here, I know every rock and hollow, every approach. In town, we'd be exposed, vulnerable. Here, I can defend what's mine. She's not yours to defend, Mara said sharply. She's her own person. I know that. Ian's jaw tightened. But she's under my protection. I made that choice when I brought her here. I'm not backing down now. Iris found her voice. What if we went to the law? The Sheriff Dawson is 63 years old and scared of his own shadow, Mara interrupted. He won't go against Clyde, not when Clyde's got armed men with him. The law in Red Hollow is whatever men with guns say it is. Then I'll be the law, Ian said quietly, and something in his tone made both women look at him. I've fought before. Know how to handle myself. And I'll be damned if I let some drunk bully take away the first good thing that's happened to me in 5 years. The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Iris felt her heart clench, felt the weight of being someone's good thing, someone worth fighting for. It was terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. At least let me stay, Mara said. Extra pair of hands, extra pair of eyes. I can shoot well enough if it comes to that. Ian considered, then nodded. All right, but you stay inside with Iris. I don't want you caught in crossfire. And what will you do? Iris asked. Wait. Ian checked his rifle again, the movements practiced and sure. And when they come, I'll make sure they understand this is a mistake they don't get to make twice. The day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Mara busied herself helping Iris prepare food. If they were going to be trapped inside, they'd need provisions. They cooked bread and stew, boiled coffee, organized supplies. Busy work to keep hands occupied while minds raced. Ian remained at the window, occasionally stepping out to check the barn and the horses. Each time he left, Iris's chest tightened until he returned safely. She tried not to think about what might happen if her uncle actually came with armed men. Tried not to imagine Ian bleeding in the snow. Tried not to picture being dragged back to hell. Stop, Mara said gently, catching Iris's hands before she could shred another dish towel with nervous fidgeting. You're going to worry yourself sick. How can I not worry? This is my fault. If you hadn't come here, you'd be dead or broken under Clyde's roof, Mara interrupted firmly. Don't you dare take responsibility for that man's cruelty. He's the villain in this story, not you. But Ian is a grown man making his own choices, and from what I see, they're good choices. Mara smiled slightly. He's been half dead since the fire, walking around, working, breathing, but not really living. You changed that, gave him something to care about besides grief and guilt. That's worth protecting, child. Iris looked across the room to where Ian stood silhouetted against the window, broad-shouldered and solid. A man who'd lost everything and somehow found strength to defend someone else's nothing. I care about him too, she whispered. Is that wrong, after everything? There's nothing wrong with caring. Mara squeezed her hand. Love doesn't follow rules or timelines. It just is. I didn't say love, Iris protested weakly. Mara's look was knowing. You didn't have to. Afternoon faded into evening. They ate dinner in tense silence, barely tasting the food. Ian insisted on doing another perimeter check as darkness fell, and Iris watched from the window, heart in her throat, until he returned. Nothing yet, he reported. But they'll come. Maybe not tonight, but soon. Clyde's not patient when he's been drinking. How do you know he's been drinking? Iris asked. He's always drinking. Ian settled back by the window. Men like him need it, liquid courage to do the things sober shame won't let them. They took shifts through the night. Mara dozed in one of the chairs, but Iris couldn't sleep, so she sat with Ian, watching the moonlight paint silver across the snow. The silence between them was comfortable despite the circumstances. The companionship of two people who'd learned to exist in the same space without needing to fill it with meaningless words. Tell me something, Iris said softly, not wanting to wake Mara. About when you were young, before all the sadness. Ian was quiet for a moment. I grew up in Kansas, farm country. Had 2 brothers and a sister. We were poor but happy, you know? The kind of poor where you don't realize it because everyone has enough to eat and nobody's mean about it. He paused. My father taught me to shoot when I was 8. Said a man should know how to protect what matters. What happened to them? Your family? Still in Kansas, far as I know. We fell out of touch after I married Sarah and moved west. They didn't approve, thought I was too young, thought she was too wild. Maybe they were right. His voice was wistful. Haven't written in years. Don't know if they'd even remember me now. You should write to them, Iris said. Family is, even when it's complicated, it's something. Your family hurt you. My uncle hurt me. My parents loved me. There's a difference. Iris pulled her shawl tighter. I'd give anything to have them back, even for a day, to tell them I turned out all right, that I survived. Ian looked at her, something soft in his expression. You did more than survive. You're thriving. Maybe not yet, but you will. How do you know? Because you're strong, stronger than you think. He hesitated, then added quietly, and you're not alone anymore. The words settled warm in Iris's chest, a promise and a truth. They sat together in the lamplight, two souls learning to be whole. The attack came at dawn on the third day. Iris woke to the sound of gunfire, sharp cracks that shattered the frozen morning. She bolted upright, heart hammering, and heard Ian shout, "Stay down!" Mara was already moving, pulling Iris away from the window. More shots, the sound of splintering wood. Through the window, Iris could see three figures approaching through the trees, rifles raised. Her uncle wasn't with them, coward that he was. He'd sent others to do his violence. Ian fired back from the doorway, and one of the men went down with a scream. The other two scattered, taking cover behind trees. For a moment, there was silence, except for the wounded man's moaning. You boys made a mistake, Ian called out. Turn around now, and you can still walk away. Marin paid us good money, one of them yelled back. Says you got something belongs to him. Nothing here belongs to Clyde Marin. Another shot, this one hitting the doorframe inches from Ian's head. He returned fire, his face grim and focused. This was a different man from the gentle farmer who'd taught Iris to curry horses. This was someone who'd seen violence before, who knew how to survive it. The barn, Iris gasped, seeing smoke. They're trying to burn the barn. Ian swore viciously. The horses, you can't go out there, Mara said, grabbing his arm. That's what they want, get you in the open. But the barn was catching now, flames licking up the dry wood. Inside, Iris could hear the horses screaming in terror, Ghost's distinctive whinny, Copper's panicked neighing. I have to. Ian shook off Mara's grip. I won't lose them too, not again. Then I'm coming with you, Iris said, already moving toward the door. No, those horses trust me. I can get them out faster. She met his eyes. We do this together or not at all. Ian stared at her for one long moment, then nodded sharply. Stay low, move fast, get Ghost first. He'll trample anyone who gets in his way. Mara, cover us. Mara took the rifle with steady hands. On three. 1, 2, 3. They burst from the cabin in a dead run. Gunfire erupted immediately, bullets kicking up snow around their feet. Iris's world narrowed to the barn ahead, to the sound of her own ragged breathing, to Ian's solid presence beside her. Something tugged at her sleeve, too close, but she didn't stop. They hit the barn at full speed, smoke already thick inside. The horses were in full panic, rearing and kicking against their stalls. Ian went for Ghost while Iris ran to Copper, fumbling with the latch while the young gelding screamed. Easy, easy, it's me, she gasped, finally getting the door open. Copper nearly trampled her in his rush for the exit. Behind her she heard Ian struggling with Ghost, the stallion too frightened to recognize friend from foe. Iris, get out! Ian shouted over the roar of flames. Not without you! She freed the mares, watched them bolt into the snow. The heat was intense now, smoke choking her lungs. Through the haze she saw Ian finally get a rope on Ghost, saw the stallion rear one last time before allowing himself to be led. They stumbled out into the cold air, coughing and gasping. The hired men had retreated during the chaos, apparently deciding the job wasn't worth dying for. The wounded man was gone, dragged away by his companions from the looks of the bloody snow trail. The barn was a total loss. They stood there watching it burn, the horses milling nervously in the snow behind them while Mara kept watch from the cabin. I'm sorry, Iris whispered. This is all my fault. No. Ian's voice was rough from smoke. This is Clyde's fault, and he's going to answer for it. Ian, he burned my barn. Could have killed the horses. Could have killed you. Ian turned to her, and his eyes were blazing. He doesn't get to do that and walk away. What are you going to do? End this. Ian started toward the cabin, once and for all. Mara met them at the door, taking in their soot-stained faces and singed clothes. Everyone all right? For now. Ian reloaded his rifle with quick, practiced movements. But this ends today. Mara, stay with Iris. Keep her safe. Where are you going? Iris demanded. To Red Hollow, to have a conversation with your uncle. You can't. He'll have more men. I don't care. Ian's face was set like stone. He came to my home, threatened someone under my protection, burned my property. That's not something I forgive or forget. Then I'm coming too. Iris grabbed her coat. If you're ending this, I should be there. Absolutely not. She's right. Mara's voice was quiet but firm. This started with her. She deserves to be there when it ends. Ian looked between them, jaw working. Finally, he nodded. All right, but you stay behind me, and if I say run, you run. Understood? Understood, Iris lied. They left within the hour, the horses rounded up and secured in a makeshift corral. The ride to town was tense and silent, both of them scanning the trees for ambush. But the forest remained empty, the attackers apparently having had enough for one day. Red Hollow was quiet when they arrived, most folks still inside their homes. The few people on the street stopped to stare as Ian and Iris rode past, taking in their appearance. Soot-stained, grim-faced, dangerous. Where's Clyde Marine? Ian asked a man standing outside the general store. The man paled. Saloon, I think. But Ian... They didn't wait for whatever warning he was offering. The saloon was dim and reeking of stale beer and cigarette smoke. Half a dozen men lounged at various tables, conversations dying as Ian entered with Iris close behind him. Uncle Clyde sat at the bar, a half-empty bottle in front of him. He turned at the sudden silence, and his face went through a rapid series of expressions: surprise, anger, fear, then a calculated smirk. Thorne, come to apologize? No. Ian crossed the room in long strides. Come to make sure you understand what happens next. And what's that? Clyde's voice was mocking, but Iris could see his hand shaking as he reached for his glass. You leave, tonight. Pack whatever trash you call possessions and get out of Red Hollow, out of this county, out of this territory if you're smart. Clyde laughed, the sound ugly and sharp. Or what? You'll shoot me? In front of witnesses? If I have to. Ian's voice was perfectly calm. But I'd rather just beat you within an inch of your life and let the law handle the rest. Arson, attempted murder, trespassing with intent to harm. That's enough to hang you, even in Red Hollow. You can't prove nothing. The 3 men you hired already ran. One's wounded, probably dying. You think they're going to protect you when the law comes asking questions? Ian leaned forward. You're done, Marin. Only question is whether you leave vertical or horizontal. Clyde's eyes darted to Iris, and hate twisted his features. This is your fault, you little... Iris stepped forward before she could think better of it. No, this is yours. You hurt me for 7 years, made me think I was worthless, made me wish I was dead. Her voice shook but held. But I survived you. I got free. And now you're the one who's trapped, because everyone in this room knows what you are. A coward who beats children and hides behind hired guns. The silence that followed was absolute. Every man in the saloon was watching, and Iris could see judgment in their faces. Maybe they'd looked the other way before, but this public confrontation, this open accusation, this they couldn't ignore. Clyde surged to his feet, hand going for his belt, but Ian was faster, rifle coming up in one smooth motion. Don't. One word, soft as snow, sharp as broken glass. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Sheriff Dawson pushed through the saloon doors, looking harassed and frightened but determined. What's all this? He demanded in a quavering voice. Sheriff, Ian didn't lower the rifle. You need to arrest Clyde Marine, hired men to attack my property, burn my barn, and assault me and mine. Got witnesses and evidence. That true, Clyde? The sheriff asked. He's lying. We got smoke in our lungs and bullet holes in my door frame that say different, Ian interrupted. And if you don't do your job, Sheriff, I'll make a formal complaint to the territorial marshal. See how that goes for you. Dawson's face went gray, but he drew himself up. Clyde Marin, you're under arrest. Come peaceful or don't, but you're coming. What happened next was chaos. Clyde threw his bottle at the sheriff and lunged for the door. Ian moved to intercept, and suddenly they were grappling, crashing into tables. Iris screamed as Clyde pulled a knife, watched in horror as it arced toward Ian's ribs. But Ian was ready. He caught Clyde's wrist, twisted hard, and the knife clattered to the floor. Then he drove his fist into her uncle's face once, twice, 3 times. Clyde went down like a felled tree, blood streaming from his nose. Ian stood over him, breathing hard. Stay down. Clyde stayed down. The sheriff and 2 other men hauled Clyde to his feet, clapping him in irons. As they dragged him toward the door, he spat blood and fixed Iris with a venomous glare. This ain't over, girl. You're still mine. She was never yours. Ian's voice cut through the threats like a knife. And if I ever see you near her again, jail won't save you. Nothing will. We clear? Something in Ian's eyes must have convinced Clyde, because he went quiet, letting himself be dragged away. The saloon erupted in conversation the moment the door closed, but Iris barely heard it. Her ears were ringing, her whole body shaking with adrenaline and relief and terror. Ian turned to her, and his expression softened. You all right? Iris nodded, then shook her head, then burst into tears. All the fear and pain and relief came pouring out in great gasping sobs. Ian pulled her against his chest, one hand cradling the back of her head while she shattered in the safety of his arms. It's over, he murmured. You're safe. I've got you. Around them, the saloon patrons had the decency to look away, giving them a moment of privacy in the public space. Someone brought water. Someone else offered whiskey. Iris took the water with shaking hands and drank while Ian kept one protective arm around her shoulders. That was brave, he said quietly. What you said to him, standing up like that. I was terrified, Iris admitted. Brave people usually are. Ian squeezed her shoulder gently. But you did it anyway. Looked him in the eye and took your power back. Mara appeared then, having followed them to town. She took one look at Iris's tear-stained face and Ian's protective stance and smiled. Well, she said, that's that then. Clyde's done. Word will spread by sundown. No one's going to respect a man who got taken down in his own saloon. She looked at Ian. You made an enemy today. Don't care. Ian's arm tightened fractionally around Iris. Some things are worth fighting for. They stayed in town long enough to give formal statements to the sheriff and make sure Clyde was securely locked up. The territorial marshal would be by within the week, they were assured, and charges would be filed. It wasn't perfect justice, but it was something. The ride home was quiet, both of them exhausted and emotionally wrung out. The sun was setting as they crested the rise above the farm, painting the snow in shades of gold and amber. The barn was a charred ruin, but the cabin stood solid, smoke rising from the chimney where Mara must have rebuilt the fire before heading back to her own place. We'll rebuild, Ian said, following her gaze. Better than before. Stone foundation this time, so it won't burn again. I'll help, Iris said, however I can. I know you will. Ian dismounted and helped her down, his hands lingering on her waist for a moment longer than necessary. Iris, He stopped, seeming to struggle with words. Thank you. For being brave today. For standing with me. Where else would I stand? Iris asked softly. You've given me everything. A home. Safety. Hope. The least I could do was stand beside you. Something shifted in Ian's expression, something warm and tentative and fragile. It's more than that, though, isn't it? More than gratitude. Iris's breath caught. They were standing close, his hand still on her waist, the dying sunlight turning his gray eyes silver. Yes, she whispered. It's more. For me, too, Ian said, so quietly she almost didn't hear. I didn't think I could feel this again. But you... He stopped, shaking his head. I'm not good with words. You're doing fine, Iris said, her heart thundering. Ian smiled, small and real. What I'm trying to say is, you're not just someone I'm protecting. You're someone I... He took a breath. Someone I care about. More than I probably should, given everything. There's no should, Iris said, echoing Mara's words. There's just what is. And what is this? Ian asked. Iris reached up, cupping his cheek with one hand. This is two broken people learning to be whole. This is finding home in the last place we expected. This is... She paused. This is something worth keeping. Yeah, Ian agreed, his voice rough. It is. He leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, but Iris didn't want to pull away. She wanted this, wanted him, with a fierceness that surprised her. Their lips met gentle and tentative, a question and an answer, a beginning. When they finally pulled apart, the stars were coming out, scattered like diamonds across the darkening sky. They stood there in the snow, foreheads touching, breathing the same air, while the horses waited patiently and the cabin beckoned with warmth and safety. Come on, Ian said softly, let's go home. And they did, together, while the world transformed around them and hope bloomed where despair had once lived. The battle wasn't over. Clyde might escape. Winter was long. Life was unpredictable and hard. But they'd face it together, these two survivors who'd found each other in darkness and chosen light. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The kiss changed everything and nothing. They didn't speak of it that night, both too raw from the day's violence and too uncertain of what words could possibly capture what had passed between them in the snow. But something had shifted, subtle as seasons turning, profound as bedrock settling into place. When Iris said goodnight and retreated to her room, Ian's eyes followed her with an expression she'd never seen before, tender and wondering, like he was looking at something precious he'd thought lost forever. Sleep came easier than expected, her body finally giving in to exhaustion, but her dreams were vivid and strange, cycling between her uncle's hateful face and Ian's gentle hands, between fire and safety, between the girl she'd been and whoever she was becoming. She woke several times to moonlight streaming through her window, each time taking a moment to remember where she was, to feel the solid reality of locked doors and clean sheets and the distant sound of Ian moving through the cabin like a guardian ghost. Morning brought weak winter sunlight and the smell of coffee. Iris dressed slowly, her fingers fumbling with buttons as nerves fluttered in her stomach. What did you say to someone after you'd kissed them, after you'd stood together against violence, after everything had changed? But when she emerged, Ian was at the stove making eggs, and he looked up with a smile so natural and easy that her anxiety melted. Morning, he said. Sleep all right? Better than I expected. Iris moved to help, falling into their established rhythm of morning tasks. You? Same. He didn't elaborate, but there was color in his cheeks that hadn't been there before, a lightness in his movements that spoke of something like hope. I was thinking, after breakfast we should check on the horses, make sure they settled after yesterday's excitement. Then maybe start planning the new barn. Already? Iris asked, surprised. No point dwelling on what's gone. Ian plated the eggs and brought them to the table. Fire took the barn, but the horses are safe. That's what matters. We rebuild, we move forward. That's how you survive. There was wisdom in that, hard-earned wisdom that came from losing everything and somehow continuing anyway. Iris nodded, settling into her chair. They ate in comfortable silence, passing salt and bread between them with the ease of people who'd learned each other's patterns. When Ian's hand brushed hers, reaching for the coffee pot, he didn't pull away quickly, just let the touch linger, warm and deliberate, before pouring her cup with careful attention. Iris, he said suddenly, setting down the pot. About yesterday. About what I said, what we... He stopped, jaw working. I don't want you to feel obligated. You've been through hell. I know emotions run high during danger, and I don't want to take advantage of... You're not, Iris interrupted firmly. Taking advantage. I kissed you back, remember? That wasn't fear or obligation. That was... She searched for words. That was me wanting to, choosing to. Ian's shoulders relaxed fractionally. Yeah? Yeah. Iris reached across the table, taking his hand properly this time. I know it's complicated. I know there's Sarah and what you lost, and there's my uncle and all that ugliness. But what I feel, what's between us, that's separate from all that. That's just us. Us, Ian repeated like he was testing the word. Then his grip tightened on her hand. I like the sound of that. They finished breakfast, still holding hands across the table. And if Iris's heart was beating too fast and Ian's smile was wider than she'd ever seen it, neither of them mentioned it. Some things were too new, too fragile to examine too closely. The horses had weathered the chaos better than expected. Ghost was imperious as always, demanding attention and treats with the entitled air of equine royalty. The mares were skittish but calming, and Copper greeted Iris with such enthusiastic affection that she laughed, the sound startling a flock of birds from the nearby trees. He missed you, Ian observed, watching the gelding nuzzle Iris's hair and pockets in search of apples. I was gone less than a day. Doesn't matter, you're his favorite. There was no jealousy in Ian's tone, just warm amusement. Can't blame him. You got a gentle way about you. Animals sense that. They spent the morning tending the horses and surveying the barn damage. The structure was a total loss, but Ian walked the perimeter with a thoughtful expression, occasionally crouching to examine foundation stones or test timbers. We'll need help, he said finally. Can't rebuild alone, not before winter really sets in. But come spring, we can do it proper. Stone base, good timber, metal roof, so it won't catch again. He looked at Iris. If you're still here in spring. Where else would I be? Iris asked, surprised. Ian shrugged, suddenly awkward. I don't know, maybe you'll want to leave eventually. Find something better than a half-rebuilt farm and a broken-down farmer. You're not broken down, Iris said hotly. And there's nothing better than this. She gestured at the farm, the mountains, him. Then home. The word hung between them, weighted with meaning. Ian's expression softened into something that made Iris's chest ache. Home, he repeated quietly. Yeah, that's what this is, isn't it? They were standing close again, the remains of the barn at their backs and the winter sun painting gold across the snow. Ian reached out slowly, tucking a strand of hair behind Iris's ear with calloused fingers that trembled slightly. I'm going to kiss you again, he said. Not quite a question, but not quite a statement either. If that's all right. It's all right, Iris whispered. This kiss was different from the first, longer, deeper, full of promises neither of them had words for yet. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Ian rested his forehead against hers. Been a long time since I felt this, he admitted. Scared the hell out of me at first. Felt like betraying Sarah somehow, but he paused. She wouldn't want me alone forever. Wouldn't want me just existing instead of living. And you, his voice roughened, you make me feel alive again. You saved my life, Iris said simply. In every way that matters. The least I can do is help you remember yours is worth living. They stood there wrapped in each other while the horses grazed nearby, and the mountains watched with ancient indifference. Eventually, the cold drove them inside, where they spent the afternoon in quiet domesticity. Iris mending clothes while Ian repaired a broken chair, both of them stealing glances when they thought the other wasn't looking. That evening, Mara arrived again with her usual lack of ceremony, bursting through the door with a basket and a knowing smile. Well, well, she said, looking between them with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Something's different here. Nothing's different, Ian said too quickly. Please, I've been midwifing and matchmaking for 40 years. I know what new love looks like. Mara set her basket on the table and fixed them both with a stern look. So, we doing this proper, or are you two going to dance around it forever? Mara, Iris started, feeling heat flood her face. Don't Mara me, child. You're living under the same roof, clearly have feelings for each other, and this is a small town with big opinions. If you're serious about this, about each other, then we need to do it right. For your sake, and for his. What are you suggesting? Ian asked carefully. Marriage. Mara said it flat out. No ceremony. I know. It's fast, it's complicated. There's history and hurt and all kinds of reasons to wait. But waiting just gives folks time to gossip and judge. You marry her proper, Ian, and no one can say a word about her living here. She becomes your wife, your partner, your equal, not your property or your charity case or whatever ugliness folks want to whisper. The word marriage hit Iris like a physical blow. Marriage meant forever, meant commitment, meant trusting that this fragile new thing between them could survive. It was terrifying and tempting in equal measure. I can't ask her that, Ian said, looking stricken. It's too much, too fast. She deserves— What do I deserve? Iris interrupted quietly. Tell me, Ian, what is it you think I deserve? He met her eyes. Better than this. Better than a hasty marriage to a widower twice your age who's still grieving his first wife. You deserve romance and courtship, and time to figure out what you want without pressure. I'm 19 years old, Iris said, her voice steady. I spent the last 7 years being told I was worthless, that I deserved nothing but pain. You think I don't know what I want? You think I can't recognize the difference between being used and being valued? She stood, moving to stand in front of him. I want this. Want you. Want a life where I'm someone's choice, not someone's burden. If you're offering marriage, real partnership, then yes. My answer is yes. Ian stared at her like she'd performed a miracle. You're sure? I'm sure. It won't be easy. I've got ghosts, Iris. Wounds that might never heal proper. There'll be days I'm difficult. Days I'm lost in the past. And this farm, it's hard work, hard living. Nothing fancy or soft about it. I don't want fancy or soft. Iris took his hands. I want real. I want honest. I want someone who sees me as I am and doesn't flinch. That's you. That's this. She paused. Unless, do you not want this? Want me? God, yes. Ian pulled her close, fierce and sudden. Want you so much it terrifies me. But I needed to know you wanted it too, that I wasn't— He stopped. That this was real for you. It's real, Iris promised against his chest. It's the most real thing I've ever felt. Mara cleared her throat loudly. Well, that's settled then. I'll talk to Pastor Williams. We can do a small ceremony, just a few witnesses. Nothing fancy, but legal and proper. Sound good? They pulled apart enough to look at her, and Ian nodded. Yeah. Good. Mara's smile was triumphant. Now, I brought supplies. We're going to celebrate with a proper meal and decent wine, and I'm going to tell you both everything you need to know about making a marriage work, starting with communication and ending with realistic expectations about each other's snoring habits. What followed was one of the strangest, most wonderful evenings of Iris's life. Mara held court at their table, alternating between practical advice about running a household together and surprisingly frank discussions about marital relations that left both Iris and Ian red-faced, but laughing. The older woman treated their impending marriage as both sacred and pragmatic, acknowledging the unusual circumstances while insisting that love was love regardless of how it started. Sarah would approve, Mara said at one point, grown serious. I knew her, Ian, knew how she loved you. She'd want you happy, want you living instead of just surviving. This girl here, she gestured at Iris. She's good for you, good to you. That's what matters. Thank you, Ian said quietly, for saying that, for everything. Don't thank me yet. Wait until you're 5 years married and sick of each other's faces. But Mara's eyes were kind, though somehow I don't think that'll be a problem for you two. She left as darkness fell, making them promise to come to town the following week for the ceremony. After she'd gone, Iris and Ian cleaned up in silence, the weight of their decision settling over them like new snow, quiet, clean, transforming. Having second thoughts? Ian asked as they worked. No. Iris dried the last plate. You? No. He hung up the dish towel with careful precision. Just thinking about what comes next, what it means. What does it mean? Iris asked. To you? Ian was quiet for a long moment. It means I'm choosing to live again, choosing hope over grief, choosing you over staying safe in sorrow. He looked at her. That's terrifying. But it's also right. It feels right. To me too, Iris agreed. They stood there in the lamplight kitchen, Two people on the edge of something enormous and irrevocable. Then Ian held out his hand. "Walk with me?" he asked. "Just for a minute. Want to show you something." Iris took his hand, letting him lead her outside. The night was cold and crystalline, stars scattered thick as spilled salt across black sky. Ian walked them away from the cabin to a small rise that overlooked the farm and the valley beyond. "This is where Sarah and I stood when we first bought the land," he said quietly. "We looked out at all this emptiness and saw possibility, saw our future, the farm we'd build, the life we'd make, the family we'd raise." His voice caught. "Thought we'd grow old here together, watch our children have children, leave something lasting." "I'm sorry you lost that," Iris said. "Sorry it ended before it should have." "Me too." Ian squeezed her hand. "But standing here with you, I'm starting to see possibility again. Different than before, but still, possibility. A new future maybe, if we're brave enough." "We're brave enough," Iris said firmly. "We've already survived the hard part. What's a little thing like building a life together compared to what we've already lived through?" Ian laughed, surprised and genuine. "When you put it that way." He pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her from behind, so they both faced the valley. "Thank you for taking a chance on a broken-down farmer with more grief than sense. Thank you for taking a chance on a scared girl who'd forgotten she was worth saving," Iris replied, leaning back against him. They stood there wrapped together while frost formed patterns on the grass and the stars wheeled overhead, and the future waited, patient and possible, and theirs for the making. The week before the wedding passed in a blur of preparation and nervous excitement. Iris found herself alternating between giddy anticipation and sheer terror. What if she was a terrible wife? What if Ian regretted his choice? What if this whole thing fell apart and she ended up alone again? Only this time it would hurt worse because she'd known what it was like to be wanted? Ian seemed to sense her spiraling thoughts. He'd find excuses to touch her, a hand on her shoulder as he passed, fingers brushing hers when they both reached for something, casual affection that grounded her in reality. At night, they'd started spending evenings together on the porch despite the cold, wrapped in blankets and talking about everything and nothing until Iris's fears quieted enough for sleep. "Tell me something you want," Ian said one evening. "From this marriage, from life. Something just for you." Iris thought about it. "I want to learn to read properly," she admitted. "I know some, but my uncle never saw the point in teaching me more. I want to read your books, read anything I want without struggling." "Then I'll teach you." Ian's voice was firm. "Every evening if you want. We'll go through every book in the cabin until your reading circles around me." "What do you want?" Iris asked. "This." Ian gestured at the space between them. "Peace, companionship, someone to build something with." He paused. "And maybe, this is foolish, but maybe children someday, if you wanted. I know it's asking a lot after what you've been through, and if you never want that, it's all right, but I want that," Iris interrupted softly. "Someday, when we're ready, I want to give you back what you lost. Not the same, never the same, but new life, new hope." Ian's hand found hers in the darkness. "We've got time. No rush. Just knowing you'd want that eventually, that's enough." The day before the wedding, they rode to town together to finalize arrangements. Pastor Williams was kind, but clearly scandalized by the short courtship, though he agreed to perform the ceremony. Mara had organized everything with her characteristic efficiency. A simple ceremony in the church, a small gathering afterward at her home. Nothing fancy but proper and legal. "You need a dress," Mara announced, steering Iris toward the general store. "Can't get married in everyday clothes." "I don't need anything special," Iris protested. "Just something clean. Nonsense. Every bride deserves to feel beautiful on her wedding day, even practical ones." Mara's tone brooked no argument. The shopkeeper, Mrs. Garrett, was coolly professional as she brought out several dresses. Iris tried on 3 before finding one that fit. Simple cream-colored cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs. Nothing elaborate, but clean and pretty. When she emerged from the dressing room, Ian looked up from the farm implements he'd been pretending to examine, and his expression made her breath catch. "You look—" He stopped, clearing his throat. Beautiful. You look beautiful. It's just a dress, Iris said, but she was smiling. It's not just a dress. Ian's voice was low. It's you, and you're beautiful. Mrs. Garrett sniffed disapprovingly, but wrapped the dress without comment. As they left the store, loaded with supplies and wedding clothes, they nearly collided with the sheriff. Thorne, Miss Vale, Dawson tipped his hat. Wanted to let you know, Marin made bail, posted by his drinking buddies. He's supposed to stay away from you both, but he shifted uncomfortably. Wanted you to know, just in case. Ice slid down Iris's spine. When? Yesterday. The sheriff looked apologetic. I sent word to your place, but I guess you were already gone. Ian's face had gone hard. He been seen around town? Not yet, but keep your eyes open. Man like that, he don't take losing well. They rode home in tense silence, both scanning the tree line for threats. But the farm was undisturbed, the horses peaceful, no signs of intrusion. Still, Ian insisted on checking every window lock, every door, before allowing himself to relax even slightly. He won't ruin this feat, he said fiercely that night. Won't let him ruin this. Maybe he won't come, Iris said, trying to convince herself as much as Ian. Maybe he learned his lesson. But neither of them really believed it. The wedding day dawned cold and clear, the kind of winter morning that felt scrubbed clean by frost. Iris woke with butterflies swarming her stomach and her hands shaking as she dressed. This was it. Today she became someone's wife, Ian's wife. Today she chose her future instead of having it chosen for her. Mara arrived early to help with hair and makeup, chattering cheerfully to cover Iris's nerves. You're allowed to be scared, child. Getting married is terrifying even in the best circumstances. But look at me. She cupped Iris's face gently. You're doing the right thing. I feel it in my bones. What if I'm a terrible wife? Iris whispered. Then you'll learn to be better. That's what marriage is, learning and growing together, messing up and forgiving and trying again. Mara smiled. You'll be fine. Better than fine. The ceremony was small and simple, just as Mara had promised. A handful of townspeople attended, some out of genuine goodwill, others clearly driven by curiosity. Iris barely noticed them. Her entire focus was on Ian, standing at the altar in his best clothes with his hair combed back and his eyes locked on hers like she was the only person in the world. Pastor Williams read from Scripture, talked about love and commitment and the sanctity of marriage. Iris heard maybe half of it, too focused on Ian's hands holding hers, on the promise in his eyes, on the enormous leap of faith they were both taking. Do you, Ian Thorne, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. No hesitation, no doubt. And do you, Iris Vale, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? I do. Her voice was stronger than she expected. Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. Ian leaned down, and his kiss was gentle and reverent and full of promises. Around them, people applauded politely. But Iris was only aware of him, of solid, certain, wonderful him, and the knowledge that she was safe now. Protected. Chosen. Wanted. They were married. The gathering at Mara's afterward was warm and surprisingly joyful. Someone had brought a fiddle, and there was dancing and food and laughter. Iris found herself passed from partner to partner, dancing until she was breathless and dizzy. But she kept finding her way back to Ian, drawn like a compass to north. Happy? He asked during a quiet moment, both of them catching their breath on the edge of the celebration. Terrified, Iris admitted. But yes, happy too. Me too. Ian kissed her forehead. Ready to go home, Mrs. Thorne? Mrs. Thorne. The name settled over her like a warm cloak. Ready. They rode home through the afternoon light, and if Iris pressed closer against Ian's back than strictly necessary, neither of them mentioned it. The farm looked peaceful as they crested the rise. Their farm now, their home, their future spread out before them in snow and possibilities. That night, after awkward and tender and ultimately beautiful discovery of each other, after nervous laughter and whispered confessions and the profound intimacy of choosing vulnerability, Iris lay wrapped in Ian's arms and thought about how far she'd come. From worthless burden to cherished wife. From property to partner. From surviving to living. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness, the first time she'd said it aloud. Ian's arms tightened around her. "I love you too. God help me, I do." Outside, snow began to fall again, covering the world in clean white silence. And in their small cabin on the Montana frontier, two broken people held each other and slept, healing and whole in home. The first weeks of marriage unfolded like pages in a book Iris had never dared to read before, each day revealing new chapters of intimacy and partnership she hadn't known were possible. She woke each morning to Ian's warmth beside her, to the novelty of shared space and shared breath, to the profound comfort of not being alone. Some mornings he was already awake, watching her with an expression so tender it made her chest ache. Other mornings she'd wake first and study his sleeping face, memorizing the lines around his eyes, the gray threading his hair, the vulnerability that only showed when his defenses were down. "Stop staring," he mumbled one morning without opening his eyes, a smile tugging at his mouth. "Can't help it," Iris replied, tracing a finger along his jaw. "You're mine now. I'm allowed to stare." "Yours," Ian repeated, opening his eyes. "Yeah, I am." He pulled her closer, kissing her forehead. "Still getting used to that, in a good way." They fell into new rhythms, building on the foundation they'd already established, but deepening it with the intimacy of marriage. Iris learned that Ian talked in his sleep sometimes, fragments of conversations with ghosts, learned that he was gentler than his rough exterior suggested, that he sang old working songs while doing chores, that he had a dry sense of humor that emerged when he felt safe. Ian learned that Iris was fiercely stubborn about small things, that she hoarded pretty rocks and feathers like treasures, that she had nightmares sometimes and needed to be held without questions until they passed. "Tell me something you've never told anyone," Iris said one evening as they worked together on supper, her kneading bread while he peeled potatoes. Ian was quiet for a moment. "Sometimes I talk to them, Sarah and Eli, when I'm out working. Tell them about my day, about what's growing, about—" He paused. "About you. Think they'd like you. Think they'd be glad I'm not alone anymore." "I talk to my parents too," Iris admitted. "Tell them I'm safe now, that I found someone good." She shaped the dough with flour-dusted hands. "Think they hear us? The people we've lost?" "I don't know." Ian set down the knife, coming to stand behind her, resting his chin on top of her head. "But I hope so. Hope they know we're still here, still trying." These moments of quiet honesty stitched them together more firmly than any vow. They were learning each other's scars, the topography of old wounds, and how to navigate around them without causing fresh pain. It wasn't always easy. Some days grief ambushed Ian, and he'd go silent and distant, working himself to exhaustion rather than feel. Other days, Iris would flinch at a raised voice or sudden movement, her body remembering her uncle's cruelty before her mind caught up. But they learned to recognize the signs, to offer space or comfort as needed, to forgive the rough edges that healing left behind. Winter deepened, and with it came a peace Iris had never known. The farm was snowed in for days at a time, cutting them off from town and the world beyond their small valley. It should have felt claustrophobic, but instead it felt like sanctuary. Just the two of them, and the horses, and the infinite white silence of Montana winter. Ian taught her to read in the evenings, patient and encouraging as she stumbled through words that had once seemed impenetrable. She taught him the songs her mother had sung, and slowly, haltingly, he began to sing them with her. "You have a good voice," Iris said one night, surprised. "Why don't you sing more?" "Haven't had reason to in a long time." Ian's smile was small but real. "Forgot I knew how." They made plans for spring, the new barn they'd build, the garden they'd plant, maybe chickens and goats like Ian had mentioned. It felt impossibly luxurious, planning a future, daring to believe they'd have one. But peace, Iris was learning, was a fragile thing. It happened on a gray afternoon in late February, when the snow had melted enough to make the roads passable, but winter still held the land in its grip. Iris was alone in the cabin, Ian having ridden to check the far fence line, when she heard horses approaching. Her heart kicked into her throat, but she forced herself to the window, hoping it was just Mara or a neighbor. It wasn't. 3 men on horseback, and even from a distance, even though she couldn't see his face clearly, Iris knew. Uncle Clyde. He'd come back. Terror flooded her system, but beneath it was something else. Anger. Fierce, burning anger that this man wouldn't leave her alone, wouldn't let her have this one good thing, wouldn't accept that she was free. She grabbed Ian's rifle from above the door, hands shaking as she checked that it was loaded the way he'd taught her. Then she positioned herself by the window, heart hammering as the men approached. They stopped 20 yards from the cabin. Clyde dismounted, swaying slightly, drunk, probably, which made him more dangerous. The other 2 men stayed mounted, hired guns by the look of them, harder and more professional than the ones from before. "Iris!" Clyde's shout was slurred and angry. "I know you're in there, girl. Come out here!" She didn't answer, didn't move, just kept the rifle trained on him through the window. "Don't be stupid. That marriage ain't legal. You're still my property, still my ward. I got rights." "You have no rights," Iris shouted back, proud that her voice came out strong despite her fear. "I'm a married woman now. You have no claim on me." "That piece of paper don't mean nothing. You're coming with me, one way or another." Clyde started toward the cabin. Iris fired a warning shot, the bullet kicking up snow 5 feet in front of him. The recoil nearly knocked her over, but she held steady. "Stop! Come any closer, and the next one goes through you." Clyde froze, then laughed, ugly and mean. "You ain't got the nerve, girl. You never did. Too soft, too scared. That's why you needed me, needed someone to keep you in line." "I never needed you." Iris's hands were steady now, rage burning away fear. "You were a monster who hurt a child because it made you feel big. But I'm not a child anymore, and I'm not scared of you." "You should be." Clyde gestured to the hired men. "I got help this time. Real help. You can come peaceful or come fighting, but you're coming." The men dismounted, starting to spread out. Iris's mind raced. She couldn't hold off 3 of them, not alone. Where was Ian? How long until he got back? Could she barricade the door, hide, run? Then she heard it. The thunder of hooves, a shout, and Ian burst from the tree line on Ghost, rifle in hand. He must have heard the shot, must have ridden hell for leather to get back. Relief and terror warred in Iris's chest. "Get off my property!" Ian's voice cracked like a whip as he pulled Ghost to a rearing halt between the hired men and the cabin. "All of you, now!" "This is family business, Thorne," Clyde shouted. "Don't concern you. She's my wife. Everything about her concerns me." Ian leveled his rifle at Clyde. "And you were warned. Told you what would happen if you came back." "You gonna shoot me in front of witnesses?" Clyde sneered. "That's murder, Thorne. They'll hang you." "Self-defense." Ian's voice was dead calm. "You came to my home armed with hired guns, threatening my wife. Any court in the territory would call that justified." One of the hired men shifted nervously. "Marin, you didn't say nothing about the law being involved. Said this was just collecting a debt." "Shut up," Clyde spat. "I'm paying you to do a job, so do it." "The job just changed," Ian said, addressing the hired men directly. "You touch my wife, you try to take her, and I will kill you both. That's not a threat. That's a promise. Now you got a choice. Right away right now and this ends peaceful, or stay and see how many of you I can put down before you put me down." The men exchanged glances. They were professionals, could probably read the situation better than Clyde's drunken desperation, could see that Ian meant every word, that this would end in blood if they pushed. "Hell with this," one of them muttered, remounting his horse. "Ain't getting paid enough to die over some family squabble." "Where you going?" Clyde raged as both men turned their horses. "I paid you." "Keep your money." The second man was already riding away. "Find yourself other fools." Then it was just Clyde, alone and furious, facing Ian's rifle. For a moment, Iris thought he might charge anyway, might let his pride and hate override self-preservation. His hand moved toward his belt, toward the pistol holstered there. "Don't." Ian's voice dropped to something cold and final. "Please don't make me do this in front of her. Just leave. Just get on your horse and ride away and never come back." "She's mine." Clyde's shout was raw with impotent rage, and something else, fear maybe, at the sudden knowledge that he'd lost. "I raised her, fed her, kept a roof over her head when no one else would." You beat her! Iris shouted from the cabin, unable to stay silent anymore. You hurt me every single day. You made me think I was worthless, that I deserved pain. But I didn't. I never did. Her voice broke. And I'm done. I'm done being scared of you. Done letting you take up space in my head. You're nothing. You hear me? Nothing. The words hung in the frozen air, and something in Clyde's face crumpled. Not remorse, he was incapable of that, but the realization that he'd truly lost, that his power over her was gone, that he was alone and pathetic and defeated. You'll regret this, he said, but the venom was gone from his voice, leaving only bitterness. Both of you. The only thing I regret, Iris said clearly, is not standing up to you sooner. Clyde stood there a moment longer, swaying in the snow, a broken man who'd never been whole. Then he turned and stumbled toward his horse, mounting with difficulty. He looked back once, and in his eyes was nothing but empty hate. If you ever come back here, Ian called after him. If I ever see you near my wife again, I won't give you another chance. You understand me? Clyde didn't answer, just spurred his horse and rode away, disappearing into the gray afternoon like a bad dream fading with morning light. The silence that followed felt enormous. Ian dismounted slowly, still watching the tree line, rifle ready. Only when several minutes had passed with no sign of return did he finally lower his weapon and turn to the cabin. Iris met him at the door. She was shaking now, adrenaline draining away and leaving her hollow. Ian caught her as her knees gave out, holding her while she shook and gasped and tried to remember how to breathe. It's over, he murmured into her hair. It's over now. He's gone. What if he comes back? Iris managed through chattering teeth. He won't. Ian's voice was certain. You saw him. He knows he lost. Men like him, they need to feel powerful. Today he learned he's not. That's the kind of lesson that sticks. When I saw him, I thought I'd freeze, thought I'd be that scared girl again. Iris pulled back to look at Ian's face. But I wasn't. I was angry. You were magnificent. Ian cupped her face gently. Stood your ground, held him off until I could get here. That took courage. I was terrified. Courage isn't not being scared, it's being scared and doing it anyway. He kissed her forehead. You were so brave, so strong. I'm proud of you. The words hit something deep inside Iris, some place that had been waiting her entire life to hear them. She burst into tears, not sad tears, but releasing tears, letting go of fear and pain and the weight of carrying her uncle's cruelty. Ian held her through it, steady and solid, until the storm passed and she was wrung out but lighter. That evening, they sat by the fire, Iris wrapped in a blanket with Ian's arm around her. They'd spent the afternoon securing the property, checking for any signs of lingering threat, but everything was quiet, peaceful, safe. Tell me about the future, Iris said quietly. The one we're building. Ian was silent for a moment, gathering his thoughts. We finish the winter. Come spring, we rebuild the barn. Plant a big garden, vegetables and flowers both, because you deserve pretty things. Get those chickens and goats we talked about. Maybe trade for another mare, start actually breeding horses like Sarah wanted. He paused. And someday, when you're ready, maybe we have a baby. Start a family for real. I think I'm ready, Iris said, surprising herself. Not right this minute, but soon. I want to fill this place with life, with love. Want to give you back what you lost. You already have. Ian's voice was rough with emotion. You already gave me back my life. Everything else is just extra. Beautiful extra. They sat there as the fire burned down to embers and the night deepened around them. Outside, the world was cold and harsh and unforgiving. But inside their small cabin, there was warmth and safety and the beginning of something that would last. Winter finally broke in late March, the snow retreating to reveal brown earth and the first tentative green shoots of spring. The change felt symbolic, like the land itself was healing. Iris and Ian threw themselves into work, clearing the debris from the old barn, preparing the foundation for the new one, turning over the garden soil. Mara visited regularly, bringing news from town and gossip that made them laugh. Clyde left, she reported one afternoon, cleared out a week ago. Heard he went east, back to wherever he came from. Word is he's not welcome in Red Hollow anymore. Men at the saloon made it clear. Relief washed through Iris. He's really gone? Really gone. Mara squeezed her hand. It's over, child. You're free. Free. The word felt too big, too wonderful to be real, but as the weeks passed and no threat materialized, Iris began to believe it, began to let herself relax into safety instead of constantly bracing for violence. The new barn went up in May, a community effort that brought neighbors from miles around to help. It was larger than the old one, sturdier, with a stone foundation that wouldn't burn and space for more horses. As they raised the final beam, Iris stood next to Ian and felt pride bloom in her chest. They'd done this, together, built something real and lasting. Summer brought its own miracles. The garden flourished under Iris's care, producing more vegetables than they could eat. The chickens Ian brought home, a half-dozen hens and a rooster, settled in and began laying. And in late June, when Iris woke feeling sick for the third morning in a row, she knew. She waited until evening to tell Ian, wanting to be sure, wanting the moment to be right. They were sitting on the porch watching the sunset, the comfortable silence they'd mastered broken only by birdsong and the distant sound of horses. Ian, Iris said softly, I need to tell you something. He turned to her, immediately alert to the seriousness in her tone. What is it? You all right? I'm better than all right. Iris took his hand, pressing it to her still flat stomach. I'm pregnant. We're going to have a baby. The expression that crossed Ian's face was something beyond words. Shock and joy and fear and wonder, all mixed together. His hand trembled against her belly, his eyes bright with unshed tears. You're sure? He whispered. I'm sure. Mara confirmed it this morning. Iris smiled through her own tears. You're going to be a father again. Ian's voice broke. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. I never thought, didn't dare hope. He was crying now, shoulders shaking with the force of it. Thank you, God, thank you. They held each other as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, two people who'd survived the worst and found their way to the best. A baby. New life. A future that stretched out bright and full of possibility. The pregnancy was smooth, Mara checking on Iris regularly and pronouncing her healthy and strong. Ian was simultaneously terrified and overjoyed, constantly hovering and fretting until Iris had to remind him she wasn't made of glass. He built a cradle with his own hands, carving it from cedar and polishing it until it gleamed. Iris sewed tiny clothes, marveling at how small they were. How much hope could be contained in such small things? Boy or girl? Ian asked one evening, his hand on her swelling belly. I don't care, Iris said honestly, as long as they're healthy, as long as we get to keep them. We will. Ian's voice was firm. No fires this time, no tragedy, just life, normal, boring, beautiful life. The baby came in late February, born in a snowstorm with Mara attending and Ian pacing the main room like a caged animal. It was hard and painful and longer than Iris expected, but when Mara finally placed a squalling, red-faced infant in her arms, every moment of pain evaporated. A girl, Mara announced, beaming. Healthy and strong. Well done, Mama. Ian was in the room a moment later, his face pale and frightened until he saw them both alive and whole. Then he collapsed to his knees beside the bed, reaching out with shaking hands to touch his daughter's tiny fist. She's perfect, he breathed. She's perfect. What should we name her? Iris asked, exhausted and exhilarated. Ian looked at her, then at the baby, then back. Hope, he said softly. I want to name her Hope, because that's what she is. That's what you both are. My hope, my future, my everything. Hope Thorne, Iris tested the name. I like it. Hope grew through the spring and summer, thriving in the mountain air. She had Ian's gray eyes and Iris's dark hair, a perfect blend of both of them. Watching Ian with her was bittersweet and beautiful. She could see the ghosts he carried, the son he'd lost, but she could also see him learning to love again without fear. learning that joy didn't require forgetting grief, that both could exist in the same heart. The farm prospered. Word spread about Anne's skill with horses, and people came from 3 counties to buy or trade. The garden produced abundantly, and Iris learned to can and preserve, filling shelves with jewel-toned jars that would see them through winter. They bought 2 more mares, started breeding them properly, watched foals being born into spring sunshine. On a crisp autumn afternoon 2 years after Hope's birth, Iris stood on the porch holding their daughter while Ian worked with a young colt in the corral. The barn stood white and solid against the blue sky. The fences were mended and strong, smoke rose from the chimney of their warm cabin. Everything they'd built, everything they'd survived, had led to this moment. "Mama, look!" Hope pointed at her father, giggling as the colt nuzzled his shoulder. "Dada, and horse." "I see, sweetheart." Iris kissed the top of her head, breathing in the smell of soap and sunshine that clung to her daughter. Ian finished with the colt and walked over, climbing the porch steps to wrap his arms around both of them. "What are my girls doing?" "Watching you," Iris said, leaning into him, "thinking about how far we've come." "Long way," Ian agreed. "From that first day when I bought you for a horse. Best bargain I ever made." Iris laughed, the sound bright and free. "You always say that." "Because it's true." Ian turned her face toward his expression serious. "You saved me, Iris. You know that, right? I was dying in this place, drowning in grief. Then you came along and gave me a reason to live again. Gave me this—" He gestured at their home, their life. "Gave me everything." "We saved each other," Iris corrected. "That's how it works." Hope squirmed, wanting down, and they released her to toddle after a butterfly. They watched her play, the evening sun turning her hair to bronze, her laughter floating on the mountain breeze. "Think we'll have more?" Ian asked quietly. "More children?" "Maybe," Iris smiled up at him. "Would you want that?" "With you? Yeah. I want everything with you." He kissed her, soft and lingering. "You're my home, Iris Thorne, my heart, my hope." "And you're mine," Iris replied. "You're my gold." They stood there wrapped in each other as the sun set over the Montana mountains, painting the world in shades of amber and rose. The shadows of the past were still there. They always would be, grief and trauma leaving marks that never fully faded. But the present was bright, and the future was theirs, built on love and survival, and the stubborn determination of 2 broken people who'd chosen to heal together. From cruelty had come kindness. From transaction had come love. From despair had come hope. Literal hope, running through the grass with her father's eyes and her mother's laugh, proof that beauty could grow from ashes. Iris had been sold for a horse at 19, treated like property, like something disposable. But Ian had seen her worth when she'd forgotten it herself, had treated her like gold when the world had taught her she was nothing. And in return, she'd given him back his life, his future, his capacity for joy. They'd rebuilt the barn, replanted the garden, brought new life into a place that had known too much death. And every day, in 1,000 small ways, they rebuilt each other too. As darkness fell and stars began to prick the sky, they gathered hope and went inside to warmth and lamplight and the comfortable chaos of family. Tomorrow would bring work and challenges and the endless demands of farm life. But tonight there was peace and love and the knowledge that they were exactly where they belonged, together, home. Whole. The story that had started with a cruel bargain ended with abundance. And if sometimes Iris woke at night and reached for Ian just to confirm he was real, that this life was real, he always reached back, always held her close, always whispered that she was safe, was loved, was home. And she was. Finally, completely, she was. The girl who'd been sold for a horse had become a woman who knew her worth. The man who'd lost everything had learned to hope again. And together, they'd built something that no one could take away. A family, a home, a love that was worth more than gold. It was everything. It was enough. It was theirs. And that was the truest ending of all.